Before the great wave of darkness swept across continents and altered the course of history, there existed a world that moved at a gentle, familiar pace. Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself standing at the edge of a small medieval town in the early 14th century. The air is cool and crisp, scented with wood smoke drifting from hearths, and the faint sweetness of freshly cut hay resting in nearby fields. Soft light spills over the rooftops, illuminating narrow stone lanes and the quiet rhythm of morning routines beginning to unfold. You walk slowly along a path worn smooth by countless footsteps, feeling the subtle give of earth beneath your boots. A baker opens his shutters, releasing a warm breath of bread and grain into the air. From a distant hill, the low sound of cattle bells travels across the landscape with a steady, calming cadence. Within the town walls, merchants arrange their goods on wooden stalls, wool dyed in gentle colors, bunches of herbs tied with twine, simple pottery glazed in earthy tones. Everything carries the unhurried pulse of a world that believes tomorrow will resemble today. A soft mist lingers above the roofs as the sun lifts higher, revealing the community in full motion. Children chase one another through sunlit patches between buildings, their laughter blending with the quiet chatter of neighbors offering greetings as they begin their daily chores. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoes gently from a workshop near the main road, each rise and fall of metal shaping the steady heartbeat of the town. Life feels grounded, reliable, shaped by seasons rather than sudden change. Yet as you continue your walk, there is a sense almost imperceptible that the world stands on the edge of something it cannot yet name. Travelers pass through the town with tales of distant lands, of ships moving across crowded harbors, of routes bustling with traders and pilgrims. Their words speak of opportunity and connection, but woven into their stories are faint murmurs of unease. A ship delayed longer than expected, a caravan that arrived with fewer members than when it departed, a return journey marked by silence rather than celebration. Still, these hints seem small beneath the gentle calm of daily life. The marketplace remains bright, voices rise and fall in familiar patterns, and animals move lazily through pastures that glow in the afternoon light. People trust in the rhythm of their world, shaped by harvests, shared meals, prayers whispered in stone chapels, and evenings spent beneath skies filled with stars that guide sailors and farmers alike. There is comfort in these routines, comfort in believing that the world will continue just as it always has. As the day stretches toward evening, the town softens into warm tones. Lanterns glow behind wooden shutters. Smoke rises from chimneys and slow, curling ribbons. The scent of stew and herbs drifts across the streets. You find yourself standing near a quiet stream that runs beside the town walls, listening to the soft rush of water gliding over smooth stones. Everything feels peaceful, steady, and assured a world balanced in delicate harmony, unaware of the shadow moving toward it across mountains, seas, and bustling trade routes. Somewhere beyond the horizon, in distant ports and crowded marketplaces, small signs are beginning to unfold, signs that the fragile calm of this world will soon be tested in ways no one can foresee. But here, in this moment, life remains untouched. The night settles gently, and the town breathes in unison with the turning of the earth, completely unaware that its quiet existence stands on the threshold of profound transformation. Here begins our journey into the story of the Black Death, not with the sickness itself, but with the world as it was just before the first whisper of its arrival. Before the great wave of sickness reached Europe, life had a texture that felt steady, tangible, and shaped by rhythms that people trusted without question. Imagine yourself walking through a countryside that stretches in slow, rolling hills, the earth softened by morning dew, the sky just beginning to warm with pale sunlight. The fields are vast and quiet, dotted with patches of green and gold where wheat, oats, and barley grow in careful rows, tended by hands that know the land intimately. Farmers move at an unhurried pace, their carts creaking softly as they guide horses across familiar paths. Worn smooth by generations, the world feels grounded here. Each sound carries with it the weight of routine, steady clack of wooden wheels, the low murmur of voices sharing instructions, the distant bleating of sheep gathered near stone fences. The shepherd leans on his staff, watching over his flock as the wind runs gentle fingers through the grass. Small cottages stand scattered along the hillsides, their thatched roofs catching the light in soft shades of honey and straw. Smoke rises from their hearths in lazy, twisting ribbons, filling the air with the scent of burning wood and simmering porridge. As the sun climbs higher, you wander toward the town nearby. The path narrows into a lane bordered by hedges and low stone walls covered in moss. Birds call from the branches overhead, their songs threading through the stillness like delicate lace. When you reach the town gates, you step into a world bustling quietly with the energy of daily life. Cobblestone streets, wind between timber-framed houses, and sunlight spills across the market square where merchants have set up their stalls. There's a comforting predictability to the market, the chatter of people exchanging news, the rhythmic movement of hands weighing produce, the soft clink of coins passed from palm to palm. You breathe in the mingled scents of fresh bread, herbs bundled with twine, smoked fish, and wool still carrying the smell of countryside fields. Women fill baskets with vegetables and grain. Artisans shape leather and wood, their tools tapping in calm, measured beats. Children weave through the crowd in bursts of laughter, darting between legs and baskets, carrying little wooden toys shaped like horses or birds. The church bells ring across the rooftops, their sound warm and expansive, rolling through the streets like a gentle wave. People pause momentarily, not out of fear, but habit, a small shared gesture in the rhythm of ordinary time. Some cross themselves before continuing their chores. Others lift their faces to the tower rising above the town, its stone surface catching sunlight in soft amber tones. In the quieter corners, life unfolds with an almost meditative steadiness. A teacher recites lessons to children sitting on wooden benches under the shade of an elm tree. A healer sorts dried herbs into small clay jars. A miller adjusts the tilt of the wooden blades that rise above the river, listening to the hum of turning gears as water flows beneath them, cool and constant. The evenings are calm. Families gather around simple meals, root vegetables, bread, broth, the occasional cut of meat if the season has been kind. Lanterns glow on tables, softening each face with gentle light. Conversations drift through open windows. Stories of harvests, of marriages arranged, of small joys and predictable hardships. There is comfort in the closeness of community, in knowing your neighbors, in trusting the land, in believing tomorrow will mirror today. In these moments, the world feels whole. It feels sturdy, as though its foundations have always been and will always remain. The idea that something invisible could move across continents and fracture this stability would have felt unimaginable. The people of this world do not know what is coming. They do not sense the shadow forming far beyond the horizon. Their days unfold with serene continuity, a fragile peace resting gently on the edge of a history about to transform. For now, the air remains calm. The earth stays warm beneath the sun, and life moves forward in familiar rhythms, unaware that everything is about to change. In the months before the shadow of the plague became visible, the first signs did not arrive as shouts or alarms. They came instead as soft, passing whispers, small details carried by travelers, murmured in port cities, hinted at in the quiet corners of taverns, where merchants gathered at the end of long journeys. These whispers were not yet frightening, not yet urgent. They drifted like faint currents beneath the surface of daily life, barely noticed, easily dismissed. Imagine yourself standing on the docks of a distant port, somewhere along the edges of the Mediterranean world. The air is thick with the scent of salt and tar, and the wooden planks beneath your feet tremble gently as ships creak against their moorings. Sailors carry crates off gangplanks, their boots thudding in slow, steady rhythms. Merchants call out prices, their voices rising above the chorus of gulls circling overhead. Everything feels, as it always has, energetic, familiar, alive, with movement. But here, in the hum of trade, the first uneasy notes begin to emerge. A sailor from a foreign ship coughs behind a crate, his face pale in a way that seems out of place beneath the sun. A merchant pauses while signing a ledger, listening as two travelers speak in low voices about a strange illness spreading somewhere in the east. Illness that moves quickly, leaving silence in its wake. They speak of caravans that returned with half their number, of towns that closed their gates earlier than usual, of markets that suddenly emptied without anyone understanding why. Yet none of this feels real to the people hearing it. These stories arrive from far-off lands, places so distant they might as well belong to folktales or legends. Illness is a normal part of life. After all, fevers, chills, winter coughs, childhood sicknesses that have always come and gone with the seasons. Why would this be any different? So the whispers float away on the breeze, mingling with the clatter of barrels and the flutter of canvas sails. Still, as days pass, more hints begin to gather, like small clouds forming on an otherwise clear horizon. In inland villages, travelers arrive carrying tales that do not quite fit together but somehow feel connected. A monastery unable to explain the sudden deaths of its brothers. A remote settlement that closed its doors and refused to trade with passing merchants. A ship that arrived light on cargo, but heavy with anxiety in the eyes of its crew. No one can describe the sickness precisely. No one knows its name. But its presence lingers in the stories like a shadow cast by a flame just out of sight. As word spreads across regions, people respond quietly at first. They lower their voices when they speak of illness. They listen more carefully to the news brought by strangers. They watch the horizon with a little more attention, as though expecting something to appear. Shepherds on distant hills notice fewer caravans traveling the main road. Market goers in crowded towns pause when they hear someone cough, even if only for a moment before continuing with their errands. These are not yet signs of fear, but of awareness so subtle that most do not realize it has taken root. The world remains warm, bright, and filled with the usual patterns of living. Fields are sown. Goods are traded. Bells ring across sunlit squares. And yet something intangible hovers beneath the surface, a thin thread of tension woven through the calm fabric of everyday life. At the edges of this world, where sea meets land and distant routes converge, the whispers grow slightly heavier. Sailors sitting around evening fires speak of ports that turned them away unexpectedly. Caravan leaders describe strange emptiness in the towns they once relied on for shelter. Priests wonder aloud if these scattered stories might be more than coincidence. But the embers burn low, and the conversations fade into drowsy silence. The night settles, and tomorrow arrives. As it always has. People do not know it yet, but these small, fragile warnings are the first signs of a storm moving steadily toward them, quiet enough to ignore, but powerful enough to alter the course of history. For now, the world continues in soft, steady rhythms, unaware that the whispers will soon become a roar. At first, the arrival of the sickness feels like a faint disturbance as subtle as a shift in the wind, as quiet as a single footstep on an empty road. Days continue with their familiar rhythm, but somewhere in the distance, a change begins to take shape. It comes slowly, then all at once, like a faint ripple turning into a cold current that no one knows how to stop. Imagine yourself in a coastal town where ships from distant lands have always brought spices, cloth, stories, and life. The harbor is as busy as ever. Ropes squeak against wooden posts, carts rattle across uneven stones, and gulls circle in slow arcs overhead. But this time one ship moves differently. It drifts into the port with a strange stillness, its sails hanging limp despite the breeze. People gather along the docks, expecting greetings, laughter, crates of goods being hoisted onto the shore, but instead, there is only silence. When the sailors step onto land, their faces look pale beneath the sun, their movements slow and uncertain. Some carry an exhaustion that seems far too heavy for the length of the journey they claim to have taken. A few stumble. One sinks to his knees, clutching his side, breath shaking as though the air itself has grown too thick for him. Onlookers exchange glances, unsure whether to move closer or step back. Then, within days, the first homes close their shutters. A cart passes quietly through the streets at dawn, carrying a figure wrapped in cloth. The baker's wife does not appear at her stall. The blacksmith stops his hammer mid-swing, staring at the road as though expecting someone who never arrives. These small absences ripple through the town, soft at first, barely noticeable, then growing heavier. People begin to understand that something is wrong. Not everyone falls sick at once. It begins with a neighbor's cough, a fever that comes on too quickly, a child who lies down to rest and does not rise again. Families whisper in doorways, unsure of what they've seen. Priests visit homes with quiet dread in their eyes. Herbalists run out of remedies they once relied on with confidence. And still, no one can name the illness that has crept into their lives. In the larger cities, rumors travel faster than the disease itself. Traders speak of a strange affliction that swells the body with painful lumps, darkens the skin in patches, and steals breath with terrifying speed. People gather in small clusters in the marketplace, speaking in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward anyone who might overhear. Some say it comes from the east, carried by caravans. Others claim it drifts in from the sea. A few insist it is a punishment, a reckoning for sins unnamed. But theories do nothing to stop what is unfolding. You walk through the town square and notice how the usual sounds feel muted, how the laughter of children has thinned, how the marketplace that once rang with lively voices now echoes with cautious footsteps. A man covers his mouth as you pass. A woman pulls her child closer when a stranger coughs. Even the animals sense something shifting. Dogs linger near doorways instead of roaming freely through the streets, and horses stamp nervously in their stalls as though expecting some unseen threat. Then comes a moment when the truth becomes undeniable. A bell tolls in the dead of night not. The bell for prayer or gathering, but the heavy, sorrowful toll reserved for loss. It rings again, and then once more, each sound spreading across the rooftops like a slow-moving wave. People wake to the sound with tight chests and trembling breaths. They lie in the dark, listening, their hearts pounding as the realization settles in. The sickness is here, not in distant ports, not whispered by travelers, but inside their own walls. By morning, the streets feel different. Doors that once swung open with morning light now remain shut. Windows stay dark. The air itself feels heavier, as though carrying an invisible weight. And for the first time, people look at one another with a quiet fear and awareness that life has crossed a threshold and cannot easily return. The plague has arrived, not with fire or thunder, but with silence, breath, and shadow. And the world, still unsure of what is coming, takes its first trembling step into a darkness it cannot yet comprehend. In the days that follow the plague's arrival, the familiar rhythm of life begins to unravel not in a sudden collapse, but in a slow, unsettling drift toward silence. It happens almost imperceptibly at first, like a lantern flame flickering before the wick grows weak. A marketplace that once echoed with laughter and bargaining now carries long stretches of quiet between each muted voice. Doors that once swung open each morning with the smell of bread or wool now remain firmly shut, the windows behind them dark and still. Imagine yourself stepping onto a narrow street at dawn. The sky glows pale, the kind of soft light that usually wakes the town with gentle promise. But today, the air feels strangely hollow. No horses clop across the cobblestones. No merchants shuffle out crates or hang cloth from their stalls. From the baker's shop, there is no warm scent of rising dough. The stillness wraps itself around you, heavy and unfamiliar, as though the world is holding its breath. You walk slowly, listening for any sound that might break the quiet. What you hear instead is the faint echo of your own footsteps bouncing lightly off empty stone walls. A single shutter creaks in the wind, its hinges loose. A stray cat darts across the street, disappearing into a broken crate. But there are no voices, no greetings, no gossip, no laughter splashing through the square. The town feels suspended, as if time itself has thinned. At the edge of the marketplace, a cart stands abandoned, its wheels half buried in dust. A bundle of herbs lies spilled beside it, untouched. The stall where an old woman once sold garlic and onions sits vacant, its canopy sagging under the weight of dew. The silence around it presses in, deepening with each passing moment. Even the birds seem hesitant to sing. As you move further through the streets, the reality becomes clearer. People are staying behind their doors, hidden not out of choice, but out of necessity. A mother peeks through a small crack in her window, her eyes wide with fear. She closes it quickly when she sees you. A man leaves a basket of bread on a doorstep, knocks once, and hurries away without waiting for a response. No one wants to linger. Every breath feels uncertain. The town, once bustling, begins to feel strangely hollowed out. Even the sound of church bells, once warm and familiar, now feels different. Instead of signaling routine, they ring with a somber weight, echoing across the rooftops with a note that trembles through the air. They toll not for gathering, but for mourning. Each ring marks another loss, another family withdrawing deeper into isolation, another home sealed from the outside world. Nights grow even quieter. Lanterns flicker weakly behind shuttered windows, casting thin slivers of light onto empty streets. Dogs howl intermittently in the distance, their cries carrying through the silence like long, mournful threads. No tavern voice is spilled into the roads. No music escapes from gatherings. The town feels as though it has folded inward, every household drawing its boundaries tighter, hoping that distance might serve as a kind of protection. You find yourself pausing at a crossroads, where the main road meets a smaller alley lined with homes. A faint breeze moves through, carrying with it the scent of tallow candles and something else. Something colder, sharper, that lingers too long in the air. A door opens just enough for a hand to place a small candle on the step. Then it closes again, the latch sliding into place with a soft, decisive click. As days slip into weeks, nature begins reclaiming the spaces humans once filled. Weeds push up through cracks in the cobblestones. Ivy creeps along the edges of buildings. The river that runs beside the mill flows with a quiet authority, its steady song unchanged even as everything around it falters. The natural world continues its rhythm, even as the human world stutters and slows. More carts pass through the streets at dawn now, but they move with a somber stillness, guided by men whose expressions are hidden beneath hoods. They do not speak. They only stop where the doors are marked, lifting their burdens with careful, heavy hands. People watch from behind curtains, their breaths tight, their hearts sinking a little deeper with every passing cart. The silence grows dense, almost tangible. It presses against the walls, fills the air between houses, settles over rooftops like a cold mist. Even the most ordinary sounds: a bucket placed gently on the ground, a door closing, a single cuff echoes sharply in the emptiness. Reminders of how much has changed. The world that once moved with easy familiarity becomes a landscape of caution, stillness, and fragile hope. The streets that once felt alive now hold a quiet weight, signaling the beginning of a darkness no one yet knows how to measure. And the silence, slowly and softly, begins to swallow the days. As the silence deepens and the days lose their familiar rhythm, people begin to search for answers, reaching out, not with certainty, but with trembling hands shaped by fear, faith, and the smallest flickers of hope. In a world suddenly unmoored, every belief, every superstition, every whispered prayer becomes a lifeline, fragile yet fiercely held. Imagine walking through a village square near dusk. The light is fading, brushing soft gold across the stones, but the shadows seem to grow faster than the sun sets. You see small groups of people standing apart, not close enough to touch, but near enough to exchange anxious glances. Their voices are hushed, as though loud words might invite misfortune. Someone murmurs that the illness is carried by bad air. Another insists that it is the work of spirits angered by human neglect. And someone else, speaking almost too quietly to hear, wonders if this is punishment from above. These conversations swirl through the village like restless winds. In the absence of understanding, people cling to whatever explanations they can grasp. Old stories resurface, stories of omens, of stars shifting their course, of plagues foretold in dreams and visions. Farmers watch the sky with tightened brows, scanning for unusual glimmers or darkened streaks across the heavens. Mothers tie protective charms above their doorways, strings of herbs meant to guard their homes against unseen forces. The church becomes a refuge for many. In the early morning, you walk toward it and hear the low hum of prayer seeping through its stone walls. Inside, candles flicker against the familiar scent of wax and cold stone. People kneel in quiet rows, hands clasped, eyes lifted toward carved wooden saints. Their whispers rise and fall like a gentle tide, pleas for protection, for forgiveness, for strength to face another day. A priest stands at the front, his voice steady but his face drawn, carrying the weight of questions he cannot answer. Outside the church, the rituals of faith shift into new forms. Processions move slowly through the street, small, Cautious gatherings led by priests carrying relics wrapped in embroidered cloth. Bells chime softly as the procession passes, echoing off shuttered windows. People stand in their doorways, heads bowed, hoping the holy objects will shield their homes from the creeping shadow. Some follow at a distance, walking barefoot as an act of humility, each step a quiet plea for mercy. But alongside faith, fear grows. You notice it in the way people flinch when someone coughs behind them. You hear it in the silence that falls whenever someone mentions a neighboring town. You feel it in the way doors are barred earlier each night, the way conversations end abruptly, as though certain words might summon danger. Even friendships feel strained care and caution intertwining in ways that leave hearts tense and uncertain. Yet amid this fear, small pockets of hope glow like embers in the dark. Healers move from house to house carrying bundles of herbs, tinctures, and cloths soaked in vinegar. Their remedies are imperfect, their knowledge limited, but their presence brings a measure of comfort. They speak softly to the sick, adjusting blankets, cooling fevered brows, offering what relief they can. Their hands, calloused and tireless, become symbols of quiet bravery. Neighbors leave food on doorsteps, wrapped carefully, handled with care. No thanks are spoken, but the gesture itself becomes a language of compassion, one that holds the community together, even as distance keeps them apart. A bowl of warm stew left on a stoop, a loaf of bread placed beside a shutter, a wooden cup filled with water and herbs. Each offering says, "You are not alone." At night, you pass a window where a family has placed a single candle. Its flame glows gently against the darkness, a soft reminder of resilience. Other windows soon follow, one flickering light becoming several, until the street is lined with tiny, wavering stars, each flame a symbol of hope that refuses to die, even when the world feels overwhelmed by loss. Some hope comes in quieter forms. Children draw small patterns in the dirt outside their homes, tracing symbols they believe will keep sickness away. Farmers touch the soil before beginning their morning chores, murmuring simple blessings learned long ago. A young woman stands beside a well at dawn, letting the cool water slip through her fingers, whispering a wish that tomorrow might be kinder. Fear remains, faith persists, hope flickers. All three move together through the streets intertwined, inseparable, shaping the way people confront the darkness. The world has changed, but the human heart continues to reach out, searching for comfort in rituals old and new, in small acts of kindness, in prayers that rise into the quiet air like fragile threads trying to hold a fractured world together. And though the path ahead is still uncertain, these threads, woven from fear and faith and hope, will guide them through the growing night. As the plague tightens its hold and the world sinks deeper into uncertainty, moments begin to emerge, small at first, then unmistakable, where people must choose how to move through the darkness. These turning points do not arrive with grandeur or clarity. They often appear quietly, like a candle being lit in a window, or a gate being closed at sunrise, or a tired breath drawn by someone who refuses to surrender. They shape the path forward in subtle yet profound ways. Imagine a town meeting taking place in the dim glow of early morning. The sky's gray, heavy with the promise of rain. Villagers gather at a distance from one another, wrapped in cloaks, their faces lined with exhaustion. The elders, once confident in their decisions, now look as unsure as anyone else. But still, they speak of closing the gates, of limiting travel, of keeping the sick apart from the healthy. The words weigh on them like stones, for shutting the gates means shutting out trade, shutting out travelers, shutting out the familiar rhythms that once sustained their community. And yet, the vote is made. The gates creak closed before noon, and for the first time, the town feels both safer and more isolated than ever before. It is a turning point, not glamorous, not heroic, but an act of quiet resolve. Elsewhere, in a narrow home on the edge of the village, a different moment unfolds. A mother tends to her sick daughter with trembling hands. She has heard the warnings: keep distance, avoid the ill, protect yourself first, but she cannot step away. She weights a cloth with cool water, brushes it over her daughter's fevered skin, and hums an old lullaby that drifts like a fragile thread through the dimly lit room. Her voice cracks, yet she continues. This too is a turning point, a choice shaped, not by logic, but by love. In some tones, fear pushes people apart. In others, It binds them together in new ways. One evening, a group of healers gathers near the church. They compare what they have seen, symptoms, patterns, small slivers of insight. Their tools are simple bundles of rosemary, vinegar-soaked cloths, amulets, prayers, but their determination is steady. They speak in hushed tones, their faces lit by a single lantern, and decide to organize themselves. Each will care for a different set of homes. Each will track the sick and the dying. Each will carry the weight that others cannot. They do not know if their efforts will make a difference, but they act anyway. And from that night forward, the town gains its first sense of direction amid the chaos. Farther along the coast, on a lonely stretch of rocky shoreline, a ship approaches at dusk. The villagers have heard stories of ports falling silent, of harbors turning away vessels out of fear. They stand together on the cliffs, watching the ship move closer. Its sails ragged, its crew too weak to shout for help. The choice lies before them. Open their harbor and risk bringing the sickness deeper into their community, or turn the ship away and abandon the souls aboard to whatever fate awaits them at sea. After a long, heavy silence, the villagers light torches and wave them in slow arcs, signaling the ship to keep moving. It is a painful decision one made, not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. They watch the vessel drift back toward the open water as twilight deepens around them. The sound of the waves fills the space where words fail. This turning point is marked by sorrow, but it becomes part of the story they will remember for generations. Everywhere the plague travels, these defining moments appear. A monk copies a prayer into a small book, hoping it will outlast the sickness even if he does not. A young boy offers his last piece of bread to an elderly neighbor who cannot leave her bed. A farmer digs graves for strangers when no one else will. A group of travelers chooses to isolate themselves in an abandoned barn rather than bring danger to the next village. A doctor burns his bloodied clothes at sunrise and starts again with bare hands. Some choices are acts of survival. Others are acts of compassion. Many are a mixture of both, but each one shifts the course of the story in ways that individuals may never fully understand. As the weeks stretch into months, the turning points accumulate like small stones laid into a winding path. They guide communities through fear and exhaustion, showing that even when the world is shrouded in darkness, people still make decisions that shape its future, sometimes out of bravery, sometimes out of duty, sometimes out of love, and often out of nothing more than the instinct to keep going. And though the night remains long, these moments, these quiet, human choices become the faint glow on the horizon that hints at the possibility of dawn. As the plague settles deeper into the fabric of daily life, loss becomes a constant presence, soft at times, overwhelming at others, but always there, like a shadow following every step. Yet alongside this sorrow, something else begins to take shape. A quiet resilience that grows slowly, gently, like a fragile sprout pushing through hard earth. It is not loud or triumphant. It does not erase the grief, but it stands beside it, offering a small but steady light. Imagine the world now, months into the devastation. The seasons continue their patient turning, indifferent to human suffering. Winter frost clings to rooftops, spring rain falls in delicate threads, summer dust settles on abandoned fields. But everywhere you look, traces of absence linger. Fields lie untended. Tools rest where they were last used. A wooden toy sits forgotten on a doorstep. Ordinary life, paused mid-breath. In the heart of a small village, a family gathers in silence. They sit around a table where one chair now sits empty. No one speaks. The absence is louder than any words could be. A mother's hands tremble as she carefully folds a piece of cloth that once belonged to her child. A father stares at the wall, tracing invisible patterns with his eyes. Lost in memories he cannot bring himself to share aloud. Their grief is immense, yet held with a kind of reverence, as though speaking might shatter the fragile balance keeping them standing. Farther down the road, a young shepherd tends to his dwindling flock. His hands move slowly, methodically. As he checks each animal, he pauses sometimes, staring out at the hills where he used to see friends walking the same paths. Now the hills are quiet, dotted only with lone figures who keep their distance. And yet, despite the emptiness, he returns to the fields every day. His presence there becomes an act of quiet endurance, a way of saying that life, even in its smallest forms, will continue. In the towns, grief gathers in different shapes. You walk through a narrow alley where lanterns burn at every fourth Dorit's flame, marking a loss. The air feels heavy with sorrow, yet touched by gentleness too. Neighbors who once exchanged quick greetings now meet each other's eyes with softened expressions, understanding shared pain. Even the simplest gesture, a nod or a raised hand, carries a depth it never had before. In the graveyards, fresh earth mounds rise in slow, uneven rows. A group of villagers moves together, not speaking, but working side by side. They dig, they lift, they lower, they cover. Each movement is a prayer in itself. Each shovelful of soil a testament to the bonds that endure even in the midst of immense loss. When they finish, they place small stones on the groundstones carried from riverbeds, from gardens, from pockets where hands once reached for comfort. But amid the sorrow, you begin to notice the ways people hold on to memory, shaping their grief into something that can be carried. A girl with braids sits beneath an oak tree, writing names in the dirt with her fingernames of people she loves, names of those she misses. She wipes her eyes and begins again, each time the wind brushes her writing away. A man carves simple symbols into wooden beams inside his home. A circle for his wife, a star for his son, a flower for his mother. The marks glow faintly in the lamplight, gentle reminders that their lives mattered. A healer keeps a small bundle of herbs tied with cloth, not for healing but for remembrance, each leaf holding a memory of someone she tended to, someone she lost. Even the silence begins to change. Where earlier it felt empty, now it carries echoes of stories retold, of names spoken softly at night, of memories whispered into the stillness so they won't be forgotten. People begin to honor their dead not with large ceremonies, but with small, tender moments. Placing a cup of water on a windowsill, lighting a candle during storms, leaving a sprig of rosemary by the threshold, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, resilience takes root. One morning, as the sun rises above a quiet square, a woman steps out of her home carrying a piece of cloth, dyed in warm, earthy tones. She hangs it between two beams outside her shop. It flutters in the breeze like a soft signal, a reminder of life's color, even in the midst of loss. Another neighbor hangs a cloth beside hers, and then another. Within days, the square glows with muted reds, browns, and blues, a quiet tapestry of resilience, woven by hands that refuse to surrender to despair. Children begin to play again, though their laughter is softer, more tentative. They chased each other in small circles, careful not to stray too far from home. Their games weave new threads into the fractured world, threads of innocence stretching through the ruins of what was lost. A few farmers return to their fields, planting seeds with slow, deliberate hope. A group of women gather herbs near the forest, sharing stories as they walk. They move cautiously, but they mob. Life, despite the weight of sorrow, begins to stir. This resilience is fragile. It trembles. It bends. It carries scars. But it lives. And in living quietly, persistently, it becomes a testament to the strength that grows not from certainty, but from the simple act of continuing. As the long shadow of the plague slowly begins to lift, the world emerges, blinking into a light that feels familiar yet altered, as though the air itself carries a memory of what has been endured. The sickness does not disappear all at once. It retreats in uneven steps, fading in one village, while lingering stubbornly in another. But gradually, unmistakably, the weight loosens. The nights feel a little less heavy. The mornings carry a faint sense of possibility, and people begin, cautiously, to rebuild the fragile threads of everyday life. Imagine a quiet morning after weeks of rain. Thin shafts of sunlight push through the clouds, illuminating fields that were left untended for too long. A farmer steps onto his land for the first time in months, his boots sinking into softened soil. His fields look unfamiliar, overgrown in places. barren in others, but his hands rest against the wooden fence with a tenderness shaped by grief and determination. A Ben's Doan scoops a handful of earth and lets it fall slowly between his fingers. This simple gesture marks the beginning of rebuilding, small and tentative, yet deeply human. And the village's shutters that remained closed for so long begin to open a little wider each day. At first, just a crack enough to let in air, enough to listen for signs of life outside. Later, windows swing fully open, allowing the scent of early blossoms and the warmth of the returning sun to sweep through rooms that have been still for far too long. Families clean their homes with quiet reverence, as though clearing away the dust might help clear away the sorrow too. The marketplace, once silent, begins to breathe again. A single stall returns first, offering a few vegetables grown in small backyard plots. Then another opens, selling herbs for cooking and healing. The sound of voices tentative, subdued ripples through the square. People approach slowly, keeping respectful distances, exchanging nods that hold more meaning than words ever could. Each interaction feels like a rediscovered language, one they are learning to speak again after months of isolation. In the towns, workers gather to repair roads, left cracked. From neglect, their hammers strike in steady rhythms, the sound echoing against stone walls with a sense of purpose. Churches open their doors once more, not for crowded gatherings, but for quiet reflection. People step inside, touching the cool stone pillars with fingertips that carry both gratitude and grief. Candles flicker on the ultra-small flames, glowing like the first signs of dawn. Children begin to play outdoors again, cautiously at first, as though unsure whether joy is allowed to return. Their footsteps patter across uneven cobblestones, weaving new life into spaces that recently felt hollow. They chase each other beneath the shade of trees that have grown fuller during the months of quiet. Their laughter soft and fragile, but undeniably alive. Their games become the heartbeat of a recovering world. Trade routes slowly reopen. Caravans travel cautiously from town to town, bringing with them not just goods, but stories of survival, of communities that endured, of landscapes beginning to heal. Ships once avoided now move through harbors with measured confidence, their sails catching the wind with renewed hope. The sound of ropes tightening against wooden docks becomes a soft reminder that connection, though shaken, is not broken. Among these signs of renewal, the memory of loss remains close, shaping the way people rebuild. They plant gardens, not only for nourishment, but in honor of those they miss. They carve small symbols into doorframes, marks of remembrance, marks of resilience. Even the festivals that eventually return are quieter, gentler. Songs are sung with softer voices. Dances move with slower steps, as though carried by the weight of what has been learned. In some places, entire neighborhoods unite to rebuild homes left empty. They gather timber, stack stones, and patch roofs with care, their hands moving with a shared rhythm born from collective grief. These acts of rebuilding become their own form of healing. Each repaired wall, a promise that life will continue. Each restored room a small offering of hope to the future. And yet, rebuilding is not simply about restoring what once was. The world that emerges after the plague is not the same as the one that came before. People understand now how fragile life can be. They move with deeper appreciation for simple moments, sharing bread, tending to fields, feeling sunlight on their skin, hearing footsteps in the lane where silence once lingered. Communities strengthen their bonds, aware of how easily those bonds can fray. Families cherish their evenings together. Neighbors speak with greater gentleness. The quiet resilience that took root during the darkest days now blossoms into a cautious, steady determination to protect the fragile beauty of everyday life. And as the seasons turn, the world changed. Scarred, but Alive gains to hum once more with the soft, enduring pulse of human spirit. As the years begin to drift away from the darkest months of the plague, the world settles into a quiet, contemplative stillness. The devastation does not fade quickly. It lingers etched into empty places at dinner tables, in fields that grow differently now, in towns where too many windows remain dark. Yet slowly, gently, time gathers around the aftermath, softening its sharpest edges without erasing what was lost. Imagine standing in a meadow on a late summer morning several years after the plague's first wave has passed. The grass sways in soft, thick ripples, richer than before. Wildflowers bloom where once only footsteps and furrows lay. Nature has reclaimed spaces that humans abandoned for too long, weaving its own patterns across the land. Birds return to rooftops with songs that feel both new and ancient. The world looks familiar, yet subtly changed as, though the plague has rearranged its quiet details. In the villages, daily life has resumed its steady rhythm, but the memory of what happened presses gently against every moment. People move with a deeper awareness. When they greet each other, their voices carry a weight that speaks of shared history. A glance between neighbors holds more tenderness. A hand offered in help feels more deliberate, more meaningful. The community that survived is smaller, more fragile, but closer in ways it wasn't before. Some buildings remain empty, their doors gently curved inward, roofs sagging in silence. These homes stand like quiet memorials, reminders of families who once lived, laughed, prayed, and rested inside them. Children walk past with hushed curiosity, their fingers brushing the wooden frames, sensing the stories held in their walls. Adults pause too, their gazes lingering a moment longer than necessary, caught between grief and gratitude. In churches, candles burn for the departed, not in large ceremonies, but in steady, everyday devotion. One candle for a mother, another for a friend, another for a healer who tended the sick until her own strength failed. These small flames flicker through the mornings and evenings, shaping a gentle ritual of remembrance that becomes part of the landscape of normal life. Hope and mourning coexist in these little gestures, woven together in soft, glowing light. Economies shift in the aftermath. Farmlands are passed to new hands. Apprentices become masters more quickly, filling roles left empty by loss. Wages rise in some towns, labor now valued in ways it once wasn't. Markets change their rhythms, shaped by a population still regaining its footing. But even in these economic transformations, memory lingers quietly, like the smell of rain long after the clouds have passed. Travelers moving across regions notice these changes. They speak of towns where orchards grow thicker because no one tended them for a season. They describe pastures where flowers bloom in unusual abundance. They share tales of families who rebuilt their homes with new designs, changing the skyline of villages that stood unchanged for generations. They note the silence that sometimes gathers in the late afternoon, a silence filled with remembrance rather than fear. Generations begin to tell stories, not all at once, and not loudly. The memories are delicate, approached with care. A father tells his son about the night the lanterns stayed lit until dawn, a vigil for an entire street. A grandmother shares a soft, trembling song sung during the darkest days, a lullaby reshaped by grief. Children listen with wide eyes, sensing that these stories are not simply historied. They are part of who they are. Some memories become rituals. A sprig of rosemary hung above a doorway each spring. A moment of silence in the market on the anniversary of the town's worst month. A small wooden figure placed near the hearth to honor healers. These rituals carry the weight of the past, but also nurture a sense of continuity. Threads connecting the world before the plague to the world emerging after it. The landscape itself stores memory. Paths once worn by carts of the sick are now trails where people walk in quiet reflection. Fields, once abandoned now, glow with wheat, vegetables, and new growth. Symbols of a resilience that took root slowly. The air feels different too, still shaped by the echoes of what happened, yet warmed by the hum of life returning. And in the evenings, when the sun melts into soft amber along the horizon, people sit outside their homes and listen to the wind moving through leaves. The breeze carries with it a faint whisper of the past, a whisper of sorrow, of survival, of the many voices that once filled these streets and fields. Time has not erased the plague. It has gathered around it, holding the memory gently, preserving its lessons, and allowing life to move forward with quiet dignity. In this balance between remembrance and renewal, the world begins to understand that even after immense darkness, the human spirit continues to breathe, to rebuild, and to remember. Centuries have passed since the Great Plague swept across Europe, yet its presence lingers quietly, subtly woven into the foundations of the world we inhabit now. The Black Death is no longer a living terror, but a memory carried through generations, a distant shadow that still shapes the way societies think, feel, and move through uncertainty. Its echoes remain in the stories we tell, in the structures we build, and in the instincts that rise within us when the world begins to tremble. Imagine standing in a modern city at dawn. The streets hum softly with early footsteps, the distant pulse of traffic, the quiet unfolding of a new day. Glass towers reflect the rising sun. Cafes set out their first warm loaves of bread. People walk with purpose, heads bowed toward phones, hands gripping morning cups, minds already drifting through the tasks ahead. Everything feels far removed from the medieval world that once struggled under the weight of an unseen enemy. And yet, beneath this modern surface lies a thread stretching back through sin. Thread shaped by the lessons learned during the plague. You notice it in the way people care for their sick, in the systems designed to protect entire communities, in the deep, instinctual understanding that health is fragile and connection can be both a blessing and a risk. The idea of quarantines, now familiar and rationalized, began as desperate attempts in plague-stricken ports. The concept of public health, of shared responsibility, of officials tracking illness, of cities responding collectively to invisible threats was born in the very shadow of those ancient pandemics. Still, the echo is not only found in institutions, but in people themselves. Walk through a museum where documents from the 14th century lie preserved behind glass. A letter written in careful hand describes a village emptied by sickness. A diary entry speaks of a family divided, of fear creeping through walls. As you read, you sense a connection not only to the sorrow, but to the resilience that carried them forward. Their voices may be faint, but they are not lost. They linger like distant footprints on a quiet path. You can feel their presence in the rituals we still keep. The lighting of candles during moments of crisis, the leaving of flowers at memorial sites, the gathering of communities virtually or in person to share grief and comfort. These gestures, gentle and universal, echo the ways medieval families honored the memory of those taken by the plague. They remind us that human sorrow, no matter the century, follows similar currents. In cities today, narrow medieval streets still bend and twist in shapes, influenced by a past, scarred by illness. Some old buildings carry marks, from that time, symbols carved into stone, records etched in wooden beams, reminders of who lived, who was lost, who rebuilt. Travelers walk these streets, unaware that they are following the same paths once taken by plague doctors, healers, and frightened townsfolk seeking answers. Even the landscape holds memory. There are fields that grew wild during the years of the plague, their borders shifting in ways that changed local agriculture forever. There are villages that never returned to their original size, their populations reshaped by the shock of sudden loss. The patterns of settlement across regions where people chose to live, where they avoided, where they rebuilt, were influenced by those years of devastation. But the clearest echo lies in the human heart. When uncertainty brushes against our world today, whether through illness, natural disaster, or sudden change, the instincts born during the Black Death stir quietly within us. We seek each other's voices. We gather in whatever ways we can. We light candles. We share stories. We lean into the tenderness that emerges when life reminds us of its fragility. And we rebuild, just as they did centuries ago. We rebuild relationships strained by fear. We rebuild communities shaken by loss. We rebuild our sense of what truly matters. The Black Death left scars on the world, but it also left a legacy of resilience, proof that humanity can endure even when darkness feels absolute. Its memory encourages caution, compassion, and the deep understanding that every era holds its own challenges, its own shadows, its own opportunities to grow. As you walk through the modern evening, watching lights bloom in windows across the cities, you may feel that faint eek, soft, distant, but enduring. A reminder that today's world stands not only on innovation and progress, but also on countless quiet acts of strength from those who lived long before. Their struggles shaped the systems that protect us. Their losses taught the world humility. Their perseverance became the foundation upon which we continue to build. And as night settles gently over the present, the echo of that ancient plague whispers through the stillness, not to frighten, but to remind us of the resilience that flows through time, connecting past and present in a single continuous breath. As our journey through the shadowed paths of the Black Death comes to a close, Let the world around you soften, every detail, settling gently like dust, drifting through a slow beam of evening light. The fields, the villages, the silent streets, the faces marked by fear and resilience. They begin to fade into a quiet tapestry of memory, woven delicately across the centuries. What remains now is not the terror or the devastation, but the profound stillness that follows a long storm. A stillness that invites rest, reflection, and a deep exhale. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a landscape where night is beginning to fall. The air is calm, almost tender, carrying the lingering scent of grass, warmed by the day. A soft breeze moves across your skin, the same kind of breeze that once passed through medieval hills, through shuttered streets, through the open fields where life slowly began again after the darkness had lifted. The sky stretches wide above you, deepening from gold to blue to the first quiet shimmer of stars that look just as they did in those distant centuries. Constant and patient witnesses to all that humanity has endured. You take a slow step forward, feeling the ground steady beneath your feet. Around you, the echoes of the past drift like gentle whispers, no longer heavy with fear, but softened by time. You can sense the strength of those who survived the hands that rebuilt homes, the voices that carried stories forward, the small acts of compassion that kept communities alive. These echoes do not cling to you. They simply pass beside you, warm and reassuring, reminding you that even in the darkest chapters of history, humanity has always found its way back toward the light. The night continues to settle, and with it comes a calm that feels almost like a blanket being drawn over the earth. Lanterns glow in scattered windows across the imagined landscape, their soft golden light flickering like tiny promises of renewal, of connection, of mornings that follow even the most difficult nights. You walk through this gentle scene, your breath deep and slow, each exhale releasing the tension of the day, each inhale drawing in a quiet, steadying peace. As you move, the world of the past blends seamlessly with the world of the present. The lessons carried from the Black Death, resilience, tenderness, caution, hope become threads woven into your own experience, settling in your thoughts the way soft embers settle in a dying fire. They glow faintly, illuminating a simple truth, that even in the presence of fear, humanity has always reached for one another. Even in the midst of uncertainty, people have always found ways to rebuild. Even when the night feels long, morning always returns. Now, let this story fade, like the last light on the horizon. Let the villages grow dim, the lanterns flicker out, the fields fall quiet beneath the stars. Let yourself sink gently into a space of calm where the heaviness of history gives way to the softness of rest. You are safe here, held in a quiet moment, removed from time, watching the echoes drift into stillness. As you prepare to close your eyes, imagine a single candle glowing in a window, steady, warm, unwavering. It is a reminder of every life that endured, every story that survived, every act of quiet courage that helped carry the world forward. Allow its glow to settle within you like a small ember of peace. Thank you for sharing this journey into the shadows and the light that followed. When you're ready to return for another story, another quiet passage through history, I'll be here ready to guide you gently into places where the past hums softly and the night invites you to drift into dreams. For now, rest. Let the darkness ease. Let the world around you soften, and let yourself drift, slowly and peacefully, into sleep.